Hi, everyone. We are looking at ways to respond to children's behavior this week. And this presentation expands on the trauma informed practices that you saw last week. So, this is kind of the next steps of things you can do. So, one of the biggest concepts that is relatively new in the last couple years, based on all of the brain research, is really that children can only learn how to regulate themselves when they have lots and lots of experiences co regulating with an adult. So, we really need to be giving children lots of experiences where, as a regulated adult, we are able to help them soothe and feel safe and calm down and come back to where they are in a place to learn and interact with others. So it is really the presence and attunement of the adult, which is what helps the child to then calm down. And they call it a little dance of co regulation. So it means that we, as adults, respond to something that's bothering a child, and then they respond to what our response is, and back and forth. Which, if you've ever watched an upset child and an upset adult together, you can see how they will continue to set one another off. So it really does make a big difference when the adults are able to regulate themselves before they try to help a child who's in distress. So some things that are required in order to co-regulate is physical proximity. So you probably have already heard a lot about when you're working with young children to be on their level. And so that's a big one. And even for kids who don't maybe like being touched or don't feel safe when adults are touching them, just being physically near them can be enough. But then there are kids that really like touch and like to be close to people. And so then being even closer, like holding them in your lap or cuddling with them is something you can do. And then attunement is just really being able to observe what's happening and sort of how it's affecting a child, and then matching the energy. So not getting upset yourself, but at least giving off the energy that you understand that there's something that's bothering them and that you're there to help. And then it kind of gives some ideas too about older kids and what you can do. And so, really, our focus is helping children become regulated when they exhibit challenging behaviors. Because if you can start to regulate, then you can start to respond and do more problem solving rather than just acting in ways that are challenging. So there's lots of information here about that. But again, it goes back to children learn how to regulate their emotions by watching the adults in their life. So parents, caregivers, teachers, it's really that monkey see, monkey do. And so I think sometimes adults think they can tell children to do one thing when they have been demonstrating something very different. So it's really important that we as adults think about how we interact with others, how we interact with children, and then trying to find a way to hold space for them when they're upset so that they can then learn to do that for themselves. And then when you get children who are experiencing anger and aggression, that can be really difficult, especially in a group setting like a childcare classroom. It really impacts lots of the kids and adults. And things like biting, I know, are always big issues in childcare. But we have to still remember that our response is what then can support a child to try and change behaviors. And sometimes that can be impacted by what's happening at home or outside of school. Um, but it also needs to be recognized that children are never doing these types of behaviors because they're just looking to really make someone mad. They really are trying to either control something that is out of their control, or they want something a certain way that they can't quite communicate to us is what they want. And so really trying to help them regulate and soothe so that we can move them through, being upset is okay, throwing things is not, or wanting something and not being able to tell your friend. And so biting them is not a good solution. So then what's a different solution? So kids are always communicating with their behavior. We have to kind of be the detectives to figure out what that means. And then resiliency is a big thing. So tied to that ACEs study with the trauma informed practice. So really resiliency is just the ability to bounce back when something negative happens. And so again, the more we can co-regulate with kids and help them to feel safe and connected and learning to regulate their emotions, we can then help their brain to develop different patterns and be able to respond after stress. And then here's some protective factors. So, some different things that have positive impacts on children, especially when stress becomes something. So, there's some great resources there. There's a video at the bottom on responsive teaching that would be good to watch if you have a minute to do that. And then some final strategies for supporting emotional development and resilience, just as you interact with children on a day to day basis, looking for ways to be responsive to their attempts to use social skills or to express emotions. And that back to that serve and return interaction. So, as an adult, observing something a child is doing and then helping them to build on that. So, oh, I see that you are trying to get a toy from your friend. You can say, my turn, and just helping them to develop the skills that they don't quite have yet, but you can kind of see through their behavior or their facial expressions or their nonverbal gestures what they're trying to do. Um, Providing lots of models as the adult, but also following their cues, kind of what they're telling you or what it looks like they're trying to show you, embedding those different activities and daily routines to talk about emotions and how you feel. Adults can be great models for things like, oh no, I'm really frustrated. I made a mistake. I need a minute to calm myself down, and then I'm going to try again. Because sometimes I think adults try to hide those things from kids, thinking that it's not okay to show them that you're human. But it's actually better if you can move through it and narrate it for the kids so they can see that, oh, even grown-ups have a hard time sometimes. And then if there's things like lots of kids in the classroom are having a hard time, you can always look for creating things like social stories, or there's already books that are created about different types of emotions that you can integrate into your classroom to help children. And then talking about or even using puppets or role playing things like being friends or sharing materials or handling when a friend does something that upsets you. So, lots of different, really intentional ways to teach kids how to handle those social conflicts. And then also sharing all of this information with families to help them too.